Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Israel in Miami. Today we celebrate Day of Aliyah, which is the day of, I would say, if we want to translate the word from Hebrew, Aliyah, it means immigration. But when you immigrate to Israel, we actually say that you are climbing up because because of Jerusalem and the Holy Land being holy, so it's a high spiritual place. So you don't just relocate yourself, but you actually move yourself up. That's why we call it Aliyah, which is climbing up. We celebrate this day because Israel is a state of immigrants, mostly Jewish immigrants from all over the world. And what we celebrate on this day is the contribution of all these people that came from all over the world and actually create the Israeli society and the state of Israel and made it what it is today. So on this special occasion, the Israeli consulate in Miami is hosting today a very special Ole immigrant that wasn't born Jewish. He decided to convert to Judaism and he decided to make Aliyah and to move to Israel. And to introduce this very special guest, I will now ask our Director of Academic Affairs, Carol Kaplan, to continue. Carol.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Galit, for the introduction. So excited to have you all here with us to celebrate Yom HaAliyah. Here with us, we have actually Nissin Black, who has been a gangster rapper, a gang member, and a faith seeker. But it is his current incarnation that is here to stay. An African-American Hasidic Jew who brings sharp beats and hook-filled rhymes to the masses. The first single of 2020, Motherland Bounce, is a confluence of everything he's ever done and everywhere he's ever been. The vibe is old school, but the song is fresh, pairing big beats with an African hook and a catchy chorus for the video that has already garnered 3.9 million views on YouTube. He says all of these journeys, being in a gang, being on the football team, was a part of me trying to say, I belong to something greater than myself. I know where and I belong somewhere. He says it's almost like trying to find that home. So I'm going to share a quick clip now of his single, Motherland Bounce. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do.
Here we go. For the motherland. We gon' play it loud until they feel it, yeah. We gon' blow the roof off the building, yeah. We gon' play that motherland bounce. Check it out now, motherland bounce. Check it out now, motherland bounce. We Baba, Black and here to shopping with a Sammy Davis cousin. Tried to dodge the industry, but now my name is buzzing. They all saying that I'm conscious. I say that it's nonsense. So I say I've been on since on had an on switch from Seattle, the rainy city where my mom lived, in Jerusalem, that golden city that was conquered. But still we moving onward. Motherland conquest. Smell me like an armpit. Yeah.
So I hope you guys all enjoyed that as much as I did. And which brings us to Nissim. So excited to have you. Our first question for you is, what inspired you? What inspired you, and who is Nissin Black? How would you define yourself in a few words?
My name is Nissin Black. That's sort of how I define myself. I think the biggest thing that inspired me just growing up listening to music. Both my mother and my father were both hip hop artists back in the 80s. So I sort of grew up with music and a love for music. So I guess the inspiration was always there. I didn't really need too many things to start that fire. And I think that what has sort of like defined me, you know, over the years as I progressed, not only as an artist, but as an individual, spiritually and everything, it's just sort of just being able to be able to adapt to anything, you know, to be able to adapt to, you know, different cultures, different places, and I would say the ability to adapt and also the ability to seek out authenticity. I'm really big into authenticity. So I feel like that's played a big role in the way I create music. Played a big role in the way that I seek out spirituality as well.
Got it. No, totally. Authenticity is so important, especially today. And so,
Right.
where are you from? How did you become Jewish? How did you make it to where you are today?
So I was born in Seattle, Washington, and I grew up actually. I've witnessed a lot of violence, a lot of different things growing up that definitely doesn't reflect where I am right now in life. But I was exposed to many different things. I myself, I was already smoking pot by the time I was 9 years old. By the time I was 12, I was already dealing and started running with a street gang, Gangsta Disciple Nation. And I found myself, still with all of that, still very much so a deep thinker. And also I would find myself also I would say that I was very spiritual as well. So the first introduction I had to religion was Islam. My grandfather was a Sunni Muslim. He came to live with us when I was a young boy, and I prayed with him 5 times a day. He would take me to the mosque, and eventually he ended up in prison, where he spent unfortunately a large part of his life he had spent in prison. And after he went, and from that time on, if anybody asked me what my religion was, I would tell them I was a Muslim. And at the age of 13, I recorded my first professional record, first song or two. I recorded 2 songs with a well-known producer in Seattle. At that time, his name was Vitamin D. And after we recorded this, it was very interesting. A good friend of mine had really been pushing me to go to this hip hop program at this community center. This community center was a missionary reach out center, but I went, because they had a hip hop program. So I ended up going and became very, very close to the people that were there. And eventually I went with them to a missionary camp. And that's when I had the full on exposure to Christianity, and I converted to Christianity at that camp. So I was thinking started going there. I was 13, and by the time I was 14, I converted to Christianity. And I went into high school. It was very good for me because I was going into high school where, the numbers were very bad in terms of graduation, and the percentage of guys that ended up on the streets and different things like that was very, very high. So it kind of protected me and shielded me. And by me being involved in that center, it actually kept me out of a lot of trouble in my high school years. That, along with playing football. So I found myself in a three-way love affair, I always say, between God, football, and God, football, and music. So I was always finding myself being distracted either this way or that way. And my 10th grade year, I had this very, very like striking moment. I remember walking in from my lunch hour and having this feeling, I guess, or thoughts or whatever that came, very, very powerful. That 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 gave me the feeling that I didn't belong where I was at. And it gave me the feeling that I knew something that no one else knew, but I didn't know what it was. But I felt very out of place, and very much so like, out of nowhere, nothing happened. By this time, there was no drugs or anything like that in my life. So it was just a total trip out, and after a few minutes, it went away. But I never stopped thinking about that moment, and I took it as a sign from God that God's trying to tell me something. So I started going back to the Christian center, the faith center that I was involved in, and I was there like faithfully. I got involved in every single Bible study group and everything, and all this stuff was really, really good for me at the time, because I mean, knowing what could have been going on in my life at this time was completely like, would have been craziness. And I also say that the same thing that led me led me to Yiddishkeit in the same way, because that fire and that desire to know who God was, and that desire to understand the Bible would later on come back to help me, find my way to Judaism. So to make a long story short, because I could go for an hour and a half on this, but so I ended up after this, still continue with music and football, and a demo of mine had made it to the desk of a talent scout at a major record label. He started calling me, and we were having conversations, and they proposed a deal. But the biggest thing they wanted from me at that time was, gangster rap, straight up gangster rap. 50 Cent was really big at this time, and that was sort of like where the rap game had sort of went to. So it was either like comply or goodbye type of thing. And I did give in. And before you know, I started sending in these different records, harder, much harder, and more gangster. And I started cursing and all these other things. And I was sort of like leaving myself. And all the meanwhile of doing this, I started to notice that all of the um, type of guys that I stopped hanging out with before sort of became my inner circle again. So I found myself also too very confused about who I was. The beautiful thing was is that I had also met my wife already by this time. Me and my wife have been together since I was 17 years old. And she comes from a different, much more Christian background. And so when she and I got together, it was almost like when I was around her, I was someone else. And then when I was around all my guys, then I was somebody else also too. So always trying to figure out who I really was. And move on a bit from this, my mother ended up passing away. My mother overdosed on pain medication. She was addicted to narcotics, and she passed away. And that was a very, very troubling time for me. Um, it was very, very hard. It was a pain that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And after that happened, I really, really focused. I went gun hole on the music, and we started to make a lot more noise. I didn't sign that deal with that label. We did everything independent, selling CDs out of the trunk, getting kicked out of all the malls and movie theaters and wherever else we can go, nightclubs or whatever. And which I wasn't even old enough to get into clubs at this time. I was still a teenager, but we were, safe to say, on a do it on your own type of thing. And as things started to spread, there was another artist who decided to make a diss track on me. And when the song came to me, I heard it, and immediately I was going to write something back. But a friend of mine said, "Listen, if we're going to beat the guy up, he won't make any more songs." So we ended up getting into a physical altercation, me and the guy. And after I left, a friend of mine came after to the same club of where we were, and he tried to kill him. Unfortunately, it was a horrible shot. Fortunately and unfortunately, thank God he has his life. But unfortunately, it put me in a bad situation to where now the guys thought after the police took him into custody, which he was caught that night and ended up in a high-speed chase, they thought that I sent him up there to take his life. So put me in a situation where it was like a kill or be killed because they were going to come after me. And during this time, I really started to cry and I started to pray to God because I needed some other answer. This can't be the life that, that I was putting in. I started to think to myself, how did I go from, this junior missionary involved in all the, in Christianity and Bible study, all these other groups to being this guy now, I'm facing this type of dilemma. So after that situation, I stayed there, prayed. 3 days later, called, we squashed everything, me and the other guy. And after that, I made a serious cheshbon. I made a serious, I say cheshbon. Made a cheshbon. I made to contemplate really if this is going to be the life that I want to live, And so I stayed home and I prayed a lot. And meanwhile, while I prayed, I decided to grab the Bible. So I picked up the Bible again and I'm reading it and going through it. And all of a sudden, things are seeming much more different than what they did to me before. So I'm starting to see more and more all these different pasukim, these different verses and different things that I understood to be talking about me and talking about the church. He's not talking about the church, he's talking about Israel. And then so I started to have more questions and, I started to dig deeper. So I went to google.com and I started typing in, questions to everything else from YouTube. I came across this one that led me to this one that led me all the way to Chabad.org. And so I started watching different videos and different things like that on Chabad. And so the first place we ended up going to, me and my family, was a messianic congregation because it was sort of like in between, believed in Torah, but also believed in, who. And so after maybe 2 years of being there, or maybe 1 year, a year and a half of being there, I decided that I wanted more. Something still wasn't sitting right for me. So I started going to a Chabad on the east side. We informed the rabbi, what our beliefs was. He told us as long as we weren't coming to missionize and we really wanted to learn Torah, we can come. And it was a very good experience for us, Rabbi Farkash and Bellevue, and Chabad on the east side. And from there, meanwhile, we started to, I came in contact with the rabbi from Jews for Judaism, Rabbi Michael Skobach, and Eli Cohen was also, I think they're both in Toronto, that helped me work out a lot of those questions that were never really answered for me. And then eventually we decided to move back to Seward Park, which was the neighborhood I actually grew up in, which was a Jewish neighborhood. And we converted, me, my wife, and my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law, who was my best friend since kindergarten. So we all had a double wedding, and that's the short version.
That's pretty amazing. It's so many different stories all in one. But I noticed a lot of music, right? Music kind of led you to this journey or that. So what is music for you? How much do you feel that your music really reflects the story of your life?
I really feel like my music is the story of my life, I always say when I go into the booth or when I go to write, I'm taking my experiences or other people's experiences with me, that have been, a part of my journey to some degree. So music has definitely been a part of my journey. And I would say also too, I tried to distance myself from it really. When I started my conversion, I actually quote unquote retired, and I got away from music for for a couple years, and it was a really good time for me because it helped me to really focus on my studies and my learning. But there was definitely a lacking there, that void that couldn't be filled because after all, it's what I was put here to do. So I felt like it will always be a part of my journey, and so I didn't. I feel like the growth and the spiritual growth that I always wanted, that I thought, initially would be a conflict to me making music. I thought it would. I feel like I didn't really get it or attain it until after I made music, because I think the music itself, that I look at it as a kli, as a vessel. It's been something that has allowed me to have somewhat of a responsibility, right? And it's a responsibility for me now, the records that I make, the things that I put forth, and to be able to use the talent that God gave me. So I think it's definitely played a major role in my life until now.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you retired from music and then you felt there was a part of you missing, sometimes people feel closer to God with the music. Do you feel that music has helped you in your journey to Judaism to reach even higher states of levels of feeling closer to God and feeling more one with the universe?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's what it was initially, because I didn't want to go back to it. But one of the simanim, I had many different simanim that led me back to music, but one of them was learning about the high spirituality of of music, the high, it's like the highest way that a person can connect to God is really through music, because the prophets and Nevi'im would receive their prophecy, through music playing, in the Beis Hamikdash. When you walk into the Beis Hamikdash, if there's no music, there's no party, right? So the Levim will be singing and bring a certain kisor salev, a certain, awakening of the heart that definitely draw you closer to God. So, definitely experiencing that myself, listening. I listened to a lot of, I think during my retired years, I was listening to a lot of Carl Bach, obviously, and a lot of like Shlomo Katz and Eitan Katz and different things like that during that time. But yeah, most definitely.
So for the audience, I don't know myself, who is Shlomo Katz? Is that just Jewish music or?
Yeah, Shlomo Katz is, yeah, he's a Jewish singer.
Got it. Okay.
And
So did
Eitan
you
Katz
miss
is his
rap?
brother. Huh?
Did you miss
Did I?
rap?
Um, I didn't at first, it was very like, yeah, because you know what, I sort of written it off because of my relationship to it, you know. I had a different relationship to it, and I think that 2 year process of like being away from it was good for me because it helped me be able to change my relationship that I had to music. So, but initially, yeah, I couldn't listen to rap. It was hard to find stuff that was positive, also, right? So that wasn't necessarily anything easy to do, and so yeah, initially I didn't. I think what made me start to miss it was sort of like when I kind of got the green light, trying to figure out how to connect back with rap. And obviously if you take a blink, rap changes, it evolves so much. But trying to be able to get a feel for the culture, I don't feel like anything's too out of my league, but I definitely felt like it was a hard thing to get back into. But I started to feel it as I came back to music.
Got it. So now we're gonna move a little bit and transition into Israel, because right now, I'm here in Miami, you're in Israel. So what made you do Aliyah, immigrate to Israel? Not every Jew does so. So what is Israel for you? Why did you make the decision to make Aliyah?
I think from the moment I had already started learning about Judaism, it just was like inevitable. I had to move to Israel. I had to come to Israel, whatever. It was just never not a time. I can't think of a time where I didn't want to come to Israel, honestly. And I think the biggest thing for me is I started off. You have to understand, reading Tanakh. It wasn't like started with Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, or Tanakh was it. So this is the land where that happened. Right, it was right here in Eretz Israel, Eretz Kodesh. So for me, it was like not even a thought for me of being somewhere else or staying in America or anything like that. I had to be here, and I think it was for a few different reasons. One, to really, especially as a ger, as a convert, to immerse yourself in the land, immerse yourself into the people, and like I said, into Torah. I mean, it's just a different world between here and here in America. So that was a big thing. And then I think the other thing was, as we started having children and we started realizing that, we wanted to be in a place where they will be able to see and appreciate the diversity within Judaism, which I feel like could be better experience here in Israel as opposed to being in America. So that was a lot of our decision. Why? Initially, my wife was not on board. It took a lot of prayers and a lot of tefillah and crying out to Hashem, so, and a lot of patience. So eventually we did it.
Well, hopefully I lived in Israel. I think it'd be so cool to make Aliyah. So maybe I'll join you one day.
Please.
That would be amazing. So do you have a message to young African Americans from your experience, from your growth, from your journey?
I mean, I guess so. I guess I would say the biggest thing is that you have to, not for every person, but anybody that came from the same type of experience that I did, because it'd be wrong to say all African Americans came from that type of experience, and not all of them did. But anybody that did come from my experience, definitely, let's say that it's the key to success is going to be finding positive role models and removing yourself out of your environment in order to actually experience the growth and to be able to find out who you are, and just to know that there's no pressure. It's okay to be you, and it's okay to not be the hardest guy, or not be the toughest guy. All of that is okay, And the biggest thing to start change and see the growth that you want to, you may have to move yourself out of the environment and find the right role models.
That makes sense. And do you feel that in a year like 2020, when so much is being discussed?
No. Hello? I'm sorry. Just 1 second.
That's okay, Kinderlach. Children.
No. I was no.
The life of a Jew. Lots of
Right,
kids.
I know.
So guys, while we have this quick break, just make sure you're also including in the Q&A any questions you might have for Nissim for our Q&A section when we finish all of our pre-prepared questions.
Never fails.
It's Kinderlach,
Yeah, right, for sure.
I worked
I
at
have
a
6 of them, so
Yeah, I worked at a preschool for a couple of years, so I have a lot of experience.
Thank
Not
you.
as much as you, that's true. Um, so anyways, as I was saying, in a year like 2020, when there's so much being discussed when it comes to both race and anti-Semitism, how do you embrace both identities and how do you feel embraced by these different communities? Do you have any experiences to share with us on that?
I think it's sort of, just being comfortable in your own skin. There's already a sense of pride that comes with. I think for me, being African American, you already grow up with a sense of pride of just being who you are and where you come from. Whether it's because that's the culture that's been passed on to us from slavery to the Jim Crow era to, what I'm saying, to segregation to now. I think it's just really sort of a built-in sort of like pride and confidence in who you are as an individual. So I don't feel like I ever had any struggles with that. And I felt like because my connection with Judaism, with Yiddishkeit, and with Hashem came through that growth of just a lot of spiritual growth, a lot of tefillah, of coming so close to God that I'm so confident in who Hashem is and what He's going to do for Klal Yisrael. That it's already been written. It's written in the books. You know what I'm saying? It's for sure a clear thing. There's no doubts, no safekos about what Hashem is going to do and how much He's going to shield us and who's His. So therefore, I just sort of have that sort of built-in pride. I think from that, from culturally, and then also my relationship with Hashem. So I think, and that was part of the reason why a song like Motherland Bounce had to be made. Felt like I was constantly having to explain myself. Black people see me and want to know how Black I am still. Jewish people see me and want to know how Jewish I am. Like what's going on. So I felt like it was sort of a way for me to sort of just be able to let everybody know that I'm very comfortable in my own skin, and I don't care who it is, who the person is, whether they're Black, white, yellow, purple, or whatever. If you got a problem, if you got a problem, or if you're suffering from anti-Semitism, for sure you got a problem with me. If you're Black, white, Jewish, yellow, green, or whatever, you got a problem with people of color, you for sure got a problem with me. So I just sort of, I think it's a sort of built on some of it from one perspective, and it worked on, a quality to have, to be confident in your own skin.
That is very difficult nowadays, and it's definitely a challenge. I feel like, especially in today's world, to be comfortable in your own skin when you're getting messages from here and from there of who to be, how to act. So I think that is a great message you're sending out to the world. Not everyone fits into a box.
Right.
You can be many different identities. And how do you feel that your different identities have mixed into Israel? How has life in Israel made you proud of who you are today as a Jew and a Black person?
I'm much less scared of police officers in Israel. So that's one thing. But no, I think, I don't know how, if it has cultural relevance, so much for me, because I don't think about these things, when I get somewhere. When I walk into a shul, and I'm the only Black guy there, um, I don't really even notice it. You know what I'm saying? Unless somebody else brings it up. It's not like I'm not trying to be, but like I'm not thinking about my color or insecure about it at all. So I'm not even thinking about it, Or if I get off a plane, you know what I mean, in JFK or whatever, and there's African Americans or whatever, I'm gonna say, hey, what's going on, brother? How you doing? You like, I don't think like, oh wow, I'm too Jewish to say something to my, to another person of color or anything like that. So I just think it's been overall comfort, like I said before, with just who I am, that makes Israel just an overall beautiful experience. There's so many different cultures, so many different backgrounds here, and in Israel, so many different type of people to connect with. I live in Beit Shemesh. There's a lot of Ethiopian Jews that live here also too. My daughter has friends that are Ethiopian, Ashkenazi, Sephardi. So as well as my boys. So they're all it's been a beautiful experience. I think it's just one cultural melting pot. Like in some degrees, like in the Haredi world, there's more um, discrimination and segregation. At the same time, it's not. It's a very weird thing because there's so many different cultural differences. Also, too, everybody's together. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting how that works.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Our Deputy Consul General, Casa, a lot of people ask her, Jews of color, and she says that in Israel, there's no real idea of Jews of color because Jews are everything, Yemenite, Ethiopian, European, a mix of everything. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And so now transitioning back into music, we heard the song Hashem Melech. It was amazing. Would you say that was a turning point in your career? And how so?
Yeah, definitely. I think in the Jewish world, it definitely exposed me to a bigger audience, much bigger audience than what I even knew existed, at least in terms of the Jewish world. I didn't know anything about the Jewish music scene. So when I returned to making music, I was just putting out music and sending it towards my, I think we're marketing more towards my previous fan base that was not Jewish. And we kept on getting a lot of feedback from like curators and bloggers or whatever, like, oh, the music's way too positive. So
good feedback.
That was great bad feedback, right? And I had no idea, and a mutual friend of mine in God Elbaz reached out to me about doing that Shibboleth song, and we agreed to do it, and after we did it, yeah, I just definitely didn't know that it was gonna take off the way that it did, and I didn't even know how successful or how big God was at the time that we did it, so I was kind of coming into it blindly.
It's amazing. I have one last question before I ask it. I just want to tell our audience, please put your questions in the Q&A portion of our chat. This is your one chance to get your question asked and answered by Nissim. So go for it. And yes.
I was gonna say I see questions popping up, but I don't know if they're going into the Q&A.
I see. Oh, okay. I see some in the chat. Okay, perfect. I'll also check those out. But before I get to those, my last question is, what are you working on now? Tell us about your newest single.
So right now I'm working on a project. I would say right now I'm just really recording songs. So I have a list of about maybe 19 songs, new songs that I have. And we just sort of like go through a process of elimination, trying to pick which one's going to be the next single, which one sounds more like it belongs on an album or a mixtape. So we haven't really decided. I think the next one I have a song, new Hava Nagila that I made. So I'm probably going to be releasing in the next couple of weeks. So that is the newest, probably the newest one coming out right now. Currently, Rerun is the newest song out, which is really like a song about like just sort of when things continuously seem to be happening again, hurdles that you want to get over or whatever. It's very, very tough, and it feels like you've been there before, and about just dusting them off and moving past and being triumph over those things. So that's the song Rerun that's out now. And then I don't know, we'll see after that. It's an intense battle between all of us, which song comes out first, which one doesn't, So we're having a little fun right now, but I'm just recording.
That's great. Yeah, like you said, it's all in the books. So whatever happens, it's going to work out. So we can't wait to hear your next single. But talking about triumphs, you talked about that in your Rerun song. How long was your conversion process? I'm sure that was a triumph as well. I'm sure it wasn't easy. How did you feel throughout your conversion process? And kind of mixed with another question, how did you cope with all the changes that came with converting into Orthodox Judaism? What was the biggest challenge culturally and practically?
So it took us 2 years, I think it was 2 years or 2.5 years. And, it was challenging. I think one of the challenging things about being where we were, there was no official program. So it was on you to show how serious you were about it. I guess that was a part of the rejection a little bit, was that there was no official program. So, you had to be very, very, vigilant, and you had to be able to get, rabbis and different people to learn with you. So that was a bit challenging, but uh, all in all, I don't think it was too crazy. I think in the end, you think it up more than what you do, and obviously going to the base den and that whole experience is, one on its own. But I think during the 2.5 years that we were there, I wouldn't say that it was crazy stressful, but it definitely was a challenge and something we had to hurdle over many different things. I think the cultural difference um, for me has been like stuff like um, everybody expecting that you eat liver, or expecting that you're just gonna eat gefilte fish on a Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? Certain things like that.
You don't like gefilte fish on a Tuesday?
No, man, it's Shabbos only and never at my house. It's somebody else's house. So, I mean, just certain things like that. I think culturally, moving to Israel is where I had the biggest culture shock. You know what I'm saying? Not standing in single file lines and people bumping into you and like it being okay. Those type of things were a little bit harder for me. Chutzpah, or like standing in the line and know that at the bank that when somebody says, "Oh, they just want to ask one question," that means that they really just cut you. Those type of things like that was a little bit harder for me to get used to. But Baruch Hashem, I've been doing all right.
That's great. Yeah. I lived a year in Israel, and it definitely is a different culture that you get used to, but
For
one we
sure.
love.
Right,
Um,
Baruch Hashem.
and I see a question here is, your name Nissim Baruch Black. What does it mean? And did you get to choose it? If not, who chose it? And why did you choose it? If you did get to choose it?
So it's interesting. I feel like Hashem actually chose it. I was going through a few different names at one point because I knew I was going to the base din, and there's a halacha that you have to be known by the name by the time you convert, in order for it to be written on your ketubah or kesuba. And so I was going through a few different names. Nissim, I narrowed it down to Nissim and another one, Yehoshua. Originally, my parents had named me Joshua for like 10 minutes. And then there was some big machlokas and they changed it to Damien in the end. But originally it was Joshua. So I was going through these different names. And one day I went to the shul early and I started talking to Hashem on my name, just praying myself. And I came early because Mincha was going to start at 7. I got there maybe 10 minutes early or whatever. And by the time I stopped praying about the name, people were going to start walking in. I grabbed the siddur from the back, and the siddur said Nisim on it. So I said, that's Mina Shemayim. So after a little bit after that, actually, I would say it wasn't until maybe last Hanukkah that I hopped something, and it's something I was learning. I can't remember what it was, and because I was born in the month of Kislev, which is also the month of the Hanukkah, and we understand that the hashpa of whatever Chag is in that month, the influence of whatever Chag or holidays in that month, it influences the whole entire month. And so the month of Kislev is called the month of Nisim, the month of miracles. So I was born on the 7th of Kislev, which happens to be the darkest time of the year, and I'm usually the darkest Jew in the room. So I feel like Hashem sort of put all these different things together and aligned it. And the whole entire idea of being Choshek and coming from Choshek and shining the light and darkness, I think it was very matim for me. So I feel like I thought I chose it, but this Ruach HaKodesh.
That's great. I love that. Kind of coming off of that, why Judaism? Harold wants to know. How did you know Judaism was the religion for you? You went through a lot of different religions, Islam, Christianity, and kind of along with that, why Chabad? It seems like you were involved with Chabad as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think the main thing, there's a few different things. I come to a conclusion. At first, I was sitting with, 8 hours a day with the Quran, a few different versions of the Christian Bible, and also the Chumash and a JPS Tanakh. So going through all these different texts for 8 hours a day, comparing and trying to go back and forth through all of them, finding myself and major, you can imagine, brain farts and twists and everything else. Um, I think there's a few different things. One thing is that um, the Jewish story was just so much more felt to be so much more honest, right? It's like a story of just everybody messing up. Everybody screws up. David Melech messes up. Moshe Rabbeinu messes up. The whole nation messes up. It just like keeps his on, and Hashem keeps saying, "I'm going to take you back," right? So like seeing that, especially in Satan Nevi'im and Satan Navi, was something for me. Is like that's my whole life. All I've done is messed up, right? So it gave me somewhat of a connection and a sort of feeling like, it spoke a little bit more to me about the ups and downs of the people as a whole. So that was one thing that connected it to me. That made me feel more connected. Another thing was I came to a conclusion that even based on all these texts, right, I come to the conclusion that if I was to believe in Islam, then God changed his mind a couple of times, right? There was at least, Judaism came, it wasn't right. Then Christianity came, it wasn't right. So now Muhammad need to fix it. Or the second time, if I would have believed in Christianity, then it was at least once. I only felt there was stability with Judaism, right? The Jewish story's in their story, but their story isn't in the Jewish story. So it just sort of both was pointing backwards. And when you lift up everything, you find Judaism at the shorish. So it was just very much so for me, it was going back. Like how much could I feel that I could rely on, for instance, Catholicism? Well, over, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of denominations, Christianity doesn't even rely on Catholicism. So why would I, so it was just sort of like who was telling me the better story and what made me feel like it was most authentic. And that was just sort of like I mentioned before about myself, always searching for the authenticity of something. And that's what led me to more to Judaism.
I see. And you talked about challenges and ups and downs. Do there's similarity. Jews were slaves, African Americans were slaves. Like African Americans recently had to endure through the Jim Crow laws. Do you feel like those injustices helped you relate a little bit more with Judaism, as Jews also had to deal with a lot of laws where they were second-class citizens in some countries?
I think, more I learned about it was much later on, right? So I think that's part of the problem and the conflict between African Americans and Jews right now in America is that there's not a lot of shared history, or not a lot of people know, right? Especially at least in the religious world also. There's just a really lack of knowledge of what the other person went through. So I grew up not even knowing anything about like the Holocaust or anything like that. So I didn't, so for me, I wasn't until I started learning about Judaism that I started to realize that these stories were actually connected. So I don't think initially it had anything. I was looking at it more from a personal experience type of thing. But I think definitely looking at it, I mean, it has been a crazy past for both Jews and the African American community, one that should bring a lot of great discussions and abilities to unite on certain issues.
That makes sense. And besides Israel, when around the world people hear of your Aliyah and conversion, how do they react?
I don't know. I think my family at first, people were like sort of shocked, you know what I mean, that I would leave America or whatever. They were probably shocked that I left Seattle even. So I think that maybe initially, but people, like when I do interviews sometimes with like the hip hop world, they're like, "Oh, wow, you're in Israel? Oh, you went all the way," type of thing. They're like, really, it's hard for them to realize, like, man, how you do it? How's it over there? So I think it's just much more like shocking, creates more conversations.
I see. And so all your family lives in Israel now, or just you, your children, your wife, and maybe your brother-in-law?
Yeah, so me, my wife, and our children, and then my sister, my brother and sister-in-law, they both live here also with their children. So we're like one building apart. We can see each other from the balcony. So kids run and mess up my house, and they go and mess up their house. It's all even.
Has to be fair.
It has to be fair.
And I don't see any more questions for now, but Julius Jackson, he says that he's with the Alliance of Blacks and Jews focusing on rebuilding the relationship between Blacks and Jews internationally. One of their current initiatives is to bring to the forefront economic opportunities for Blacks and Jews to help the middle class and those of lesser means on the African continent in America. And they're interested in collaborating with you. So I hope it's okay if I connect you afterwards. Sure. Julius Jackson has done amazing things. And that's all the questions that I received. Is there any way, any last thing you want to end off on to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is now, as we are just now leaving out of the high holidays, heading into Hanukkah, and we're having like the funnest time going through all these different parshiot from Noach, and now we're going to Lech Lecha. This week in Lech Lecha talks about the Avraham Avinu, sort of like what I said before, that environment is everything. Environment is everything. So now, especially when we have to sit at home so much these days, is that in order for a person to be who they want to be, they have to first thing start and check your environment, right? And figure out how it is that you can go and Lech Lecha be to yourself like Avraham Avinu. So I think that's my message.
That's beautiful. I was just learning about Noach, and he definitely went through his challenges and he was able to persevere through his challenges. So I definitely think you're a great embodiment of that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming together with us, sharing your story with our audience. Thank you so much for our audience in participating, and have a great week. Hopefully see you soon in person.
Bezat Hashem, soon. Maybe I'll come back to Miami.
That would be great. Miami's pretty cool. People tend to like it, so yeah. Palm trees are waiting for you.
Okay, only for a visit.
yeah, maybe we could get a show one day. I don't know, we'll see.
I would love to.
That would be amazing. Nissim in Miami, that's what we'll call it.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week.